Shall we begin now then? Yeah, so welcome to the Qualitative Research Methodology Workshop, Doing with AI. So I know it's a hot topic and quite trendy, so I hope that this is going to go well, meeting your expectation. I'm pretty sure that it will. This event is co-funded by the Department of Education here at SNU and also Network Learning Consortium in Europe. So thanks to those funders that we could invite these amazing scholars from Europe, and then we can offer this for free to our students. That's very exciting. And before going further, thank you so much for our two guests coming here all the way from Europe. Yeah, we're very looking forward to hearing you too. So how it works is that we're going to have two different workshops, but very connected when it comes to theme of AI. So first 2 hours, we're going to listen to Nataša. And Nataša prepares some of the activities we can actually do hands-on together during the 2 hours. And after that, we'll probably have like 10 minutes break. And then we're going to move to Nina's presentation. And then Nina will also offer some of the activities that we can sit through and thinking through and doing through those. So I'd love to introduce my dear colleague and friends from Lancaster University. So I have to introduce myself before. All right, I'm sorry. So my name is Kyungmi Lee from the Department of Education. I'm teaching qualitative research methodology and specialize in the critical studies in EdTech. So how technology will shaping our learning and teaching practices, and I tend to see those things quite closely, but also critically. So that's who I am. And yeah, again, so going back to Nataša, so I will read some, but I have to say that she's my dear friend, and I'm very excited to have her with me. So Dr. Nataša Lacković is a senior lecturer, which is associate professor here in South Korea at the Department of Education Research at Lancaster University in the UK. And she's also senior fellow of Higher Education Academy and directing a Social Future Center. So she's co-editing, and she's involving in many journals, but co-editing the Video Journal of Educational Pedagogy, which is quite related to what she's going to talk about today. And she's also a representative of UK on the committee at the International Association of Semiotic Studies. For the past 1 decade or two, I've been seeing her developing her specialty, and Nataša has contributed greatly to shaping education research. And then she changed the trends through relational and multimodal and arts-informed framework that she really politically aimed to change and make social and education changes. As you can see, that she's very artistic. Her hat is her trademark, that she always has that hat put on. And as part of such an effort, Nataša, some of her recent work and book publication include relational and multimodal higher education, and things and the mind. So everyday materiality, places, spaces, and student mental health. So she has been trying to apply this, her methodological specialty in different types and different topical areas, including student mental health, that probably we all need to focus more on. And then inquiry graphics in higher education. I think that you're going to mention that and introduce that more in detail today during the lesson. So her recent interest and international project include topics on how citizens learn and how universities help mediate the development of different citizen literacies. So there are multiple literacies that require for citizens to be good citizens. That's what she's doing, and which is linked to the notion of learning city, and contextualize this project, which is UNESCO Learning Cities and Pascal Network. So she's quite interdisciplinary, like myself, like methodology. Someone has a methodological specialty always involved and dragged into different projects. So we are quite useful. I think that's what have happened to her. But throughout those research experience, you will see that I'm so excited that we'll get a lot of benefits from her specialty and experience that she's going to share with us. So I think that's good. She used to be my housemate too. So when I was in Lancaster, we didn't fight that much. But anyway, so that's all I have to say. And I'll put you guys in the trusty hands of Nataša. Shall we give her a round of applause to welcome?
Thank you. So can you hear me well? Yes. Okay, thank you, Kyungmi. I don't think I could have introduced myself better than you did. So thank you so much for that. And it's great to be here. More than 24 hours of traveling straight into action, but I'm excited. You see that I can also talk without the microphone. So do you actually want me to talk next to the microphone? Is that better? Because you want to actually record. Is that okay? Or I can also just use the microphone and then, manage like that. So without further ado, I would just get into the structure of the talk and the workshop. So we will be exploring the idea of images and qualitative research. And yes, I love qualitative research, and I've been working extensively with visual media. So let's say that visual media are part of my specialization or specialty, whatever you want to call it. And we will consider then generative AI and generative AI images in particular for critical thinking and analysis. Especially we will tackle and reflect on bias in generative AI imagery. And then we consider brief hysteroscopic regimes of technology in relation to this topic of images and visual technologies. And I will then mention post-digitality in relation to post-digital literacies, which is something that I have been also working on. And then in connection to that, a very focused method that goes from photo to generative AI elicitation. But to be really more precise, it would be generative AI image elicitation, because that goes from photo to image elicitation, in this case with generative AI. And this is something that I have termed an inquiry graphics method. So basically inquiring different concepts in education research through visual media, through images. So pairing the image and image interpretation with conceptual fields and conceptual interpretation, how we can do that. And I'm hoping that I will have some response from you, because you are also here interested in doing different kinds of research in different educational research topics. So I'm very excited about hearing more about that. Okay, so this is very quickly, maybe up to 10 minutes, but maybe even a few minutes. So the question immediately, I'm diving straight into it. So have you used images or other than verbal expression in your research? It's a very straightforward question. Why and how, and why not? And quickly, please just discuss with the person next to you, or if you're not paired, turn around and see also who is not paired, so that you can actually quickly pair up with someone and just discuss, okay, have you used images in your research? And if you have not, why not? Because I think that's an interesting question. And I will be going around to see what people are doing. But let's start immediately. We don't have much time. It's a long workshop. Okay, 5 minutes. Yes, post it on. Yeah, post it. Not right. Yeah, just here, quickly. Have you? Okay, so I'm just going around checking kind of what people's experiences are. So have you used, visual media, images, or any other kind of modalities, maybe audio recordings or, anything, maybe different kinds of interviewing methods? Because personally, I have been experimenting a lot with different types of interviewing methods, like walking interviews, interview with objects, interviews with drawings, like all sorts of things. So what have you done? Or if you haven't, just very simply, why not? I'm just curious. There's no judgment whatsoever.
Yes.
Okay.
So collect some kind of the public size
Okay.
and take a picture of the public size and
Yes.
analyze what language is used and also how the image of the given landscape is constructed. Yeah.
That's interesting. And how do you define linguistic landscape? Because what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that actually you were photographing how language is used in science in different places,
Yes,
right?
in the public space.
In public
Yes.
spaces. So basically, we're using imagery, which is great, and we're still focusing on language, correct? How is it going, guys? So have you used images? Have you not? Why not?
Just their timetable, their working timetable.
Okay. So it's more kind of they were sharing their timetable, and then you organize the interview around that. Yeah, that's a type of photo elicitation for sure. That's a type, although it's not like pictorial. It's more like table driven. It's to organize thoughts and to focus the interpretation. But it is definitely part of such methods. That's interesting. And anyone else, like maybe pictures, but why not? I'm curious about why not.
Because I don't know any methodology.
Okay. So you would like to learn more. Okay. Thank you. Very, very interesting discussions, and I heard that some people have used visual media in their research, and in what ways. I also learned that. And I think that there is still a lot, to be explored here and to be, I would say, exchanged, because I'm not here to just stand in front of you and say, oh, this is how you should do things. I'm here to collaborate with you, to exchange experiences and ideas and knowledge, okay? So now, after this discussion, let's move on quickly. And so could you use the post-it notes now and very quickly, I think, put it to the nearest wooden slit there part. Just write one of the research questions or research interests of yours and just put it there, just stick it. And one of the colleagues here would be sharing the post-it notes, okay? So can you just do that before we move on? Because I want to actually look at your research questions at different points of the workshop so that I can actually speak to your own interests. So I'm not just talking about my own interests, like, this is great to be done, but what can you do? So if you can just write down. It can be a research area. It can be a key concept that you're interested in, or key area that you are working in. But if you can share one question that you are preoccupied, I think that will be best. So let's go, and then we can engage also in further experiments. Yes, and I'm aware of the time. Don't worry, don't worry, people. I'm aware of the time. I think we have time. Well, let's see. And then when you're done, just stick it to the nearest. I'm not sure if it's wooden, but I think it's just a wooden. I'm not sure what it is, like a part of the wooden column. Yeah. Wooden wall part, because I think it should stick there best. That's what the colleagues told me. So once you're done, just stick it to your nearest wooden wall. And what I mean by that, one is there, one over there, then there's one there just at the back, and one to my right. Yes, just that's the nearest one. Just hop, hop. Don't be shy. So wherever your nearest one is. Okay, so if I can help, because I was told that it's best to stick it there. So this is what I mean. This looks to me like a wooden column, okay? Even if that's okay. So you see, it sticks really well. So yeah. Because I think it can fall off from this particular wall. Because we tried. Yes. Yeah, okay. Because I will come here and check it out. Because I also want to write up a short report after the workshops with some ideas, and then I will share it with Kyungmi so that she can also share it with all of you present here, so just to hear and see some of my ideas about it. Okay? Yes, are we moving on? Let's do it, let's go. Okay, so why use generative? Again, very straight to the point, or making a point immediately. So why are generative AI images useful, or why I think they're useful, or maybe why a few colleagues think that? So they're useful because we can actually explore generative AI outputs based on the prompts that are related to our research interests, right? So we can think, okay, what am I interested in? And then we can explore together with a generative AI image generator platform. And I'm not sure which ones you have used or you have tried, but there are a few. And I will just show some of the outcomes from 3 platforms. And by doing that, why would we do that? We can understand better participants' interpretations and prior knowledge that is connected to these key areas of the research. So whether, if it's your research and you're interested in participants' conceptions, interpretations, experiences, you can just ask them to provide you with a generative AI created image, and then you can collect what we can call a conceptual image gallery, and then analyze that gallery in relation to your main research topic or interest. And you can literally analyze it in the way that you would analyze like a theme analysis, but you need to pay attention both at the image, so what the content of the image is, and what the concept that you want to explore is. So I will illustrate that as we move forward, because right now it might seem, okay, this is exciting, it's interesting, but what is it? And how does it look like? So we will illustrate that, or I hope to illustrate that. And you see here what you can ask. You can ask, and we will be repeating that. I will be repeating that throughout the workshop, to create one possible image, and there are endless possibilities. And what is so special about generative AI, and trust me, I'm not some sort of generative AI evangelist, not at all. I think that we need to be quite critical of these machines. But what is very special or unique about generative AI image generation is that today we can then ask the machine to actually create the image that contains quite a few things that are actually not possible to be photographed. Did you see what I mean? Like, the image can have the level of richness and complexity, although, of course, we know it's a kind of uncanny and fake, but it's useful for analysis, for critical discussion. So that's one of the things that I want to underline. And this links to my ongoing research. I just want to refer to that. I'm working with a group of colleagues, and the research is led by the colleagues at the University of Liverpool, and it's funded by Staff and Education Development Association. It's a UK agency, and we're actually looking at how teachers in the UK use generative AI for multimodal communication and teaching and learning. And we're developing sort of a guidelines that we will publish by the end of this year. So I will also share that when it's ready, just to link up to that. But this is some of the things or some of the resources where my thoughts are coming from today. Let's do a quick visual experiment, very quick. I will tell you a word, and then I will ask you to concentrate and visualize the word. Okay? Ready? Okay, so what's the word? The word is scientist. Sorry? Goggles, okay. Where is the scientist? Okay, what's your image? I mean, don't be shy. This is really interesting. So, okay, so raise your hands if your image, if the scientist is a man. Raise your hands. Come on, probably more. Okay, so probably most of the people. And, you know, we start then thinking about imagery and stereotypes, imagery and bias. That is, of course, sociocultural, but it's also sociocultural material. Okay, and don't worry, this happens in every single environment, you know, culture, country that I've been to. Every single. No matter the continent, no matter the country, majority of people imagine a man. Majority of people imagine a man who is in a lab environment, maybe experimenting, doing chemistry. So basically, social sciences, qualitative research, this is not yet, you know, the work of science, but we have some work to do, guys, okay? And and most people imagine like some sort of a figure, and of course, a lot of the time it's a white man, and then a lot of the time some sort of Einstein kind of man, maybe a little bit of that hairstyle, you know, etc., etc. So, but I wanted to see what generative AI would offer to me. Okay, so I asked ChatGPT, can you create an image of a scientist? And this is a very interesting outcome, because there were concerns that generative AI, especially ChatGPT, had a particular racial bias. And there were efforts to retrain ChatGPT not to be biased racially, okay? And it's interesting because I asked a friend of mine who's not in my area at all, is not an educational person. And I asked him, can you ask the same question from ChatGPT? And also, the scientist offered was a similar face, let's put it that way, a similar face to the one that the ChatGPT on my laptop provided with, because I'm also aware that the answers provided are also geared to what I'm writing about. And I can tell you that recently I was co-writing a paper on Black placemaking, okay? So that's also interesting to what extent, you know, the words that we insert into the engines then also feed these global algorithms. Okay, so this is Gemini, okay? Recently, I was, of course, exploring around Seoul and going to South Korea, and you know, and my laptop, I think, kind of knew that I was preparing for this trip, and then this is the Deep AI. Deep AI is probably the most traditional, you know, if you look back, but what are you noticing? Okay. Look at that. Tie. Okay, not the tie, but the tie. Okay? And then that's because I'm the image person. So I immediately concentrate on what's in the image. And I saw like Thai in the lab. Let me now, let me now ask, this, generative AI, this question. Do scientists wear ties in the lab? Like really, really simple question. No, scientists generally don't wear ties. But why? And I think the answer is kind of reasonable because it's kind of health and safety and, lots of things can happen if you're in a lab with a tie. So we need to think about these things, about representations that are offered by these machines and how we can analyze them, but also critique them, and then raise awareness and consciousness about what representations are shown. But the question is the bias, is it machine bias or the bias of the machine, or whose bias is it? Sorry? Users' bias? Or is it just the bias of all of us, basically? Is it just general human bias? Okay, you tell me, guys, what was the prompt here for this picture? And this is from one article published that analyzed images. So what do you think? What was the prompt? Okay, let's guess. Anyone? What was the prompt? Okay, what do you think the prompt for this was? Show me
a doctor is volunteer in some third world or something.
Okay, so basically the prompt was show me a doctor or potentially a certain kind of doctor working with children in some countries potentially, or working with children in the countries where there are problems or maybe poverty, maybe the word black was used. Okay, so this is the prompt. Okay. So I thought that was brilliant because it just shows you. And that was 23. So and there was an outcry in terms of generative AI bias. And then you see they really got to retraining, So we can now check like 2025 what the situation is. So probably my point here is also that those machines are changing at the speed of light. So we need to catch up and we need to kind of explore what's going on there. What would be the possible research questions for the pictures of the scientists? Okay. So if you ask, okay, so what does it all mean? So what kind of questions could I potentially or possibly connect those images to, and then show them to my participants, or even ask the participants to provide their images of scientists, or even just do the experiment that we all did together. What's your image of a scientist? So why are women underrepresented in sciences? What are students, teachers, academic staff's perceptions of these things? Women in science, what counts in scientific field? So what is science, by the way? Is it just STEM? Social science, is there a gender gap in STEM? Is there? We can probably answer that immediately. So is probably not a good research question. So that's why I put it here, because the question is why. The good question is why, or what's going on. But we can most probably easily find an answer. But the real good question is, what do participants think and what do they perceive? And of course, about your ideas. What do you think? Just very briefly, what do the experiment and generative AI images, in your opinion, suggest about its use in research? What do you think? Like how, just think now creatively of your feet, how could you now, having engaged in this part of the workshop, why would they be useful? What could you use them for? What's your opinion? What's your idea? Just think a little bit. Would you like to say something? Anyone? Yeah? No, I'm just going around. Any idea? I mean, anything.
Just question, what do you mean by the experiment?
Yes,
in
the experiment, the thought experiment, when we imagine.
Okay.
Yes. So that was like the little, very baby thought experiment, like visual experiment. So that was the visual experiment. And so how we imagine things in our mind and why things are as they pop up in our mind. So this is something that I have been doing for a very long time, which is critical media literacy. A lot of our representations, and you know, in higher education, we do work on developing critical thinking, you know, analytical and critical thinking and critical pedagogies as well. But we cannot escape. You know, we do not live isolated in a little black box. You know, we cannot escape the influence of the media that are bombarding us and have been bombarding us for a very long time, since we were really, really little. And that's what is inside outside. It creates our subconsciousness. And this is, for me, that has been fascinating in my research. When I unpack that with my participants, they're like, oh my God, am I this biased? And then I just say, we all are. Don't worry, let's just move on. They get shocked by some of the images. When I ask them, okay, what do you see first? When I say this, they're like, oh, am I really seeing this? And I'm like, well, it's fine. Don't worry. It's not about you. We're not talking about you. We're talking about your interrelatedness with the entire culture, society, not just locally and globally, kind of locally, because we're both positioned locally and globally. And a lot of influences in advertising, what we see on the television, it's very globally kind of shaped and has this kind of global character. So generative AI outputs for various concepts. They can represent the human originating representational bias. And that's what I want to underline, that this is coming from us, what generative AI images are showing. And that has been influenced by salient or dominant media or news information. And these images can then engage participants during the interview by asking participants to analyze those images, to act as conversation triggers. And in this workshop, I will be offering some of the principles how to do that, the principles how to conduct that kind of interview and how to analyze it, okay? But before that, another question is, how could you use an AI image generation in this way to address an area of your research, of your interest, okay? Now we're getting closer because, you know, we started with just thinking about whether you have used. Now I would like you to focus on having heard and having seen, you know, these examples, just one idea. I would like you to spend 5 to 10 minutes discussing with your peer to come up with one idea in relation to your research, how you could incorporate the generative AI image, let's say in your interviews. Because, you know, the quintessential interview, but we want to diversify it, not the classical. We want photo elicitation kind of type, image elicitation, and finally generative AI image elicitation. So let's do it. 5 minutes chit chat, and I will be going around and also looking at your research questions so that I can photograph it and then have it with me when we continue talking. Your research interest, your field, one question or one idea how you could, what you would ask your participants to do with the generative AI platform, image generating one. Okay, let's go. 5-10 minutes. Do you have any ideas? What are you working on at the moment?
I'm analyzing L2 textbook in published in South Korea,
Okay.
and if I have to use that, and I would let my participant to imagine a topic picture for
Yes.
a specific lesson.
Yes.
So if it is about favorite color.
Yes.
And we need some kind of like representative
Yes,
picture for
yes.
the unit. So I let them imagine the right picture. And if they have come up with some kind of images that include digital technologies, that I will be so interested in.
Yes, exactly, because you give them something, you give them a topic that you presume would have technology, and then you see what they come back with you, and then you have the conceptual gallery, but maybe there is no technology, or maybe there is a specific way of using, and that's your finding. You see what I mean?
Exactly.
That's great.
I'm totally with you.
That's fabulous. Okay. Right. Thank you, everyone. I think we need to move on. Okay, so I hope you had fruitful and interesting conversations. I certainly have. It was very interesting to learn and talk with all of you. I mean, all of you, with the ones that I managed to talk with. And as I mentioned and promised before, I will have a look at the research questions, and I will share, some of the ideas, some triggers, with Kyung-mi, so that that might be, just something of an exchange that we can work on together. But let me just have a very brief, speedy, absolutely not completely incomplete, brief history of tech visuality of scopic regimes. So this is what is apparently the first ever picture of a human being. So, if you're familiar with the history of photography and the machine called kind of daguerreotype, so Louis Daguerre, and this is the picture photographed in 1838. And as you could potentially see, maybe not, there is a person, something's going on there. There is probably a person there. I mean, it's claimed that there are people, but it's a bit fuzzy. Nevertheless, this is what is presumed to be the first picture. So I'm quoting here the work by Yuan and Yuan, Channels of Desire and Mass Images and the Shaping of American Consciousness, in particular because they're American scholars. And I think this work is very interesting because it speaks to what we were discussing earlier about the formation of consciousness through the influences of the media. Whether we like it or not, whether we are critical or not, because we are constantly in that landscape, something is coming through that, unless we, especially with our students, pause, discuss and unpack, that criticality is not really there, is not achieved if it's not discussed. So that's why I'm always in favor of critical media literacy. So you can see that this is, with photography, it was revolutionary at the time, this kind of visualization technology, and it actually did have that role in changing, shaping, influencing human memory. I mean, think about the role of photography in, let's say, modern, most modern human history. I mean, since it was used and invented, what it is used for, where it's used. And now we have a completely new medium, with generative AI, with AI, and what it's doing with visuality, with images. And we're really in the middle of it. Photography, according to the Yuans, can be seen as a technology of desire because it speaks to our socio-cultural imaginaries. Human desire to stop the inevitable passing of time, but that also create, recreate, and direct public consciousness as well as the knowledge of the world. I really love this quote. It's very deep, but it's very interesting. And then, look at this one. What do you think it shows? It's a bit of a bizarre image. And if you're really far away, I can describe that there are some, I have not personally seen these beings. They look like human beings, but they have wings. And then some sort of a really, they're baiting again with wings. And then are there storks? I'm not sure. Even unicorns. Okay. but I will tell you what that was. So that was one of the first fake news or pranks in history. Okay, because I mean, speaking about news and fake news, etc. So the picture is the Great Moon Hoax, again 19th century. So, if we talk about, misinformation, fake news are the new thing. No, they're not the new thing. People were experimenting and doing pranks and, intentional or unintentional. I mean, this was supposed to be a prank, but you see what I highlighted. It was published, and some people really believed that this was the moon. They really believed that because it was published in newspapers and kind of official communication media. So when we talk about the state of the post-truth or misinformation or fake news, we're actually talking about this mixing of truth and fabrications. That when it's mixed, it has strangely powerful effect. And I'm sure you've noticed that, in the expression of public opinions, etc., in the media, in public debates. So this is something that I was writing about in this article on post-digital living and algorithms of desire, where I use and refer to this hoax to consider where we are, where these kinds of, in a way, ways of communication, where they originated and when they started, and what we're dealing right now, with avatars, with generative AI imagery, with deep fakes, etc. And if we use images, we can, with them, again, always, that is being repeated, access research participants, students, interpretation and prior knowledge. I always repeat that. Because if we work with imagery and ask people to interpret it, that's very spontaneous way, very visceral, very spontaneous way of expressing your opinion, your interpretation, where you're not really thinking what you're really saying. You're kind of looking at the image and describing, and then interesting things pop up, really interesting things, Moving forward, I'm not sure where I'm... Okay, so from first digital picture, this is supposed to be the first digital picture, the child of Russell A. Cursis, who worked in Kodak in the 70s, so used digital image scanner to produce it, to generative AI images. So it's a bit of a leap, but you see how fast, it's a whole history, and as I mentioned, very incomplete, but I'm just trying to make point that visuality in our society is a really strong and dominant part of who we are and how we live. And, all of our devices and social media that we engage with, especially if they're in video format or they use visuality in some strong way, they're there in our lives, surrounded. We are surrounded by it all the time. So I will just share with you one reflection. And this is part of my artistic practice. So, for example, in this particular exhibition, I was working in 2014. It was an art residency in Poland, and I was working with conceptual photography. So at the time, I wanted to ask questions about human relationship with technology, and also what's happening here. Who is reflecting whom? How we are reflected in technology? What are these big questions that we need to ask? So Valor, who's based at the University of Edinburgh, so she recently published in 24 AI Mirror. The book is called AI Mirror. And it's very interesting because this is what she says. Today's most advanced AI systems are constructed as immense mirrors of human intelligence. They do not think for themselves, but they generate complex reflections caused by our recorded thoughts, judgments, desires, needs, perception, expectations, and imaginings. So if we say that, and that's also part of that picture series, to explore the human condition then, entangling with the technology and all those media and technologies, we may consider post-digital as the concept as particularly interesting. So I would just say a few words about that before I really focus on a particular method within images so that we can think about it. But the previous one that I showed about, the mirror image, what Valera is arguing is that basically we are the ones reflected in technology. It's based on our own, biases. If we say that technology is biased, that data is coming from the human world. Okay, so this is a very common happening. And I think, some of you, if not many of you, have engaged with the concept of the post-digital. So I'm just hooking to that to introduce a very focused generative AI image method. So it's taken from the deposit photos. Deposit photos gain credit for this image. So this is relatively recent way of communicating. That definitely wasn't in the 19th century, when we talked about, those fake news or the hoax or the first photography. But visual technologies, they really develop at the speed of light. And what post really means, it's not really after technology. It's when technology is so embedded in our lives that we just kind of casually, spontaneously just there. And then one thing that I'm currently, for example, developing is the role of attention or attention switching in between different things and within that interface. So we have technology, we have people, bodies, we have the environment, the artifacts. So how attention switches and goes and entangles in these environments. One thing that is out this year is post-digital semiotics, and this is what Kyung-mi mentioned when she was introducing my work. I have worked in semiotics. So semiotics, which is the science of interpretation, if you ask me what it is in a very simple way, but some people would interpret it in different ways. Okay, so what's the major concept of it? Is a sign or a semiosis or signification, etc. We will talk a little bit about it. I don't want to scare you with semiotics, but to me personally, if we talk about qualitative methods, semiotics definitely has something very valuable to offer. It's definitely a qualitative approach and methodology, deeply, deeply qualitative. So some of the things that I say this entry on post-digital semiotics is about representations and the importance of representations in today's life and how we co-create these representations these days, with generative AI. And of course, when you talk about physically tangible or imaginary objects, we can, think about this pairing of that kind of digital materiality with algorithm processing. And that's the unique character of post-digital communication, if we think about it, with this example of what I showed earlier about this thing that technology is so embedded that we do not think too much about using it in social circumstances. And here two quotations that I think are important. So what is happening is, of course, this is the beginning. It remains to be fully understood. But we need to think about technologies in relation to surveillance capitalism and, in particular, attention economy. And attention economy, I think, is a useful concept. And there is a book by Williams about stand out of our light. Yeah, that's the title of the book. And it is about attention economy, how actually we are all free laborers for our digital devices. And they're all competing for our attention. And then what's the role of modern teachers? Is to redirect attention of the student into something deeper, to something to pause, to analyze, to critique. Because, machines are efficient. And okay, we can be efficient, and that's good, but we can also do certain things that I think are very human and valuable in that sense. So the notion of post-digital, what it signifies is the following in some of my thinking. So it's a shift from an approach to digital technology presence in our lives and education without actively considering the body and the environment. So, there was research in technology before, or educational technology. But now we're shifting to exploring the integration, interconnectedness of embodied environmental meanings with socio-material structures, individual and collective attention. This can be an interesting happening. And in relation to that, I like working with digital materiality. And digital materiality is not just digital, but digital materiality, according to Leonardi, is the matter of all technologies, like we discussed that. So matter is, the hardware as well. So something that's quite physical. So that's part of this digital materiality, stemming from Leonardi. And then instantiation in terms of how digital instantiates certain concepts, ideas through models and modeling. And then representation is something that, for example, originally Leonardi did not pay that much attention to how things represent, how things are digitally represented. So I will reflect on that very soon. And then the significance is, of course, attention, what we pay attention to, how we interpret things, where the salience is. So we use, I think in that paper, we use the notion of interface seams, which is basically what is that happens in between our own attention. So I see something is salient in this digital information and what the creator wanted me to see as salient. So, when you actually see it, and I'm the one, if I'm really focusing on it, so I'm really punctuating it. So that's why the seam, like seams on clothing. So you are doing that with your eyes, basically, but within a larger interface. And there's your body and the environment where it's happening. So this seam is very salient, attentional, an intentional moment or focus within an experience, or let's say interacting with technology. But I think we do talk about that in that particular article. And then we also talk about post-digital literacy through entanglements of different elements like bodies, people, materiality, digitality, digital materiality, the environment. This is happening in some sort of a entangled way. And when I say entanglement, because sometimes people ask me, is this really hybrid? I think there is merit. This is my personal opinion. I think there is merit to distinguish certain things in order to understand how they're fused. I personally, because some people talk about soft and hard, or weak and strong approaches, to socio-materiality or post-humanism, etc. I mean, post-humanism might be the hard approach or strong approach to this meddling and entanglement. And do you see what I mean? When I say everything is connected and entangled now, yes, we could probably agree that things are happening, There is air, and maybe there's some bacteria in here that we do not see, but they're still happening, And then there is this design of the classroom, and then the ways how we use technologies. And all these things constitute this experience and the moment. But I think there is still merit to understand, to look at these individual elements and to think then how they come together. Like, working between distinctions and this very hard entanglement. So, if you ask me where my personality is, I would say that. And yeah, we talk so much about visuality and technologies are visual, but why? I've been working with this for 15 years, and trust me, still it's very fresh. It's new, it's almost revolutionary. And hopefully it won't be like in 5 years or so. So why is it, obscured? And what I also encounter is looked down on. What is glorified is statistical causality in things, but can we really be certain about causalities? And we know what statistics can show and what they're helpful for. I'm not against it, but I think qualitative research and qualitative research with visual media can offer a lot of things for understanding culture, interpretation, the way people think, the way how things happen, become in the world. Yes, and this is the kind of argument. Why? So we can link this symbolic expression that we've been, working with for many, many years, decades, with these things: visuality, materiality, spatiality, not special, spatiality of everyday living. And this is important for these things, to understand better our social consciousness and how it has evolved, our culture, to spur critical thinking in that manner, especially in terms of media influences. And I'm probably circling around media influences here. So this is the gap. Okay. It remains underexplored, and I've heard all of this. It's artistic, it's arty, not to say arty-farty, and not scientific or serious enough, and infantile, just for children. That's what, are you researching children? Are your participants little children in kindergarten? And then it's okay. Still hearing that. Still, quite often, actually. So I think that there's some serious work to be done. And these are kind of the references that I refer to, the evidence that this is what I'm saying. In this book from 2020 that builds on the research that was finished in 2015, and still very little in this area, very little. So we're now a community. You can do your own thing, your own kind of visual research and development. It's entirely up to you. I'm just here sharing. Okay? So what am I talking about in terms of methods? We had photo elicitation for a very long time. People have used it in visual sociology. We have other visual fields, visual anthropology, then, you name it, visual semiotics, the field that I have worked in. But definitely there is a strong visual element in the approaches such as sociology and anthropology. And it's very strong, but sometimes people are likely not to recognize it. I mean, even in the work of Bourdieu, that everyone cites, he did actually research with materials and with visuality, more or less. He went to people's houses, observed what they do, how they use things, and then kind of made conclusions. And a lot of the cultural capital that he talks about is linked to very material and value-driven, I would say, beliefs and culture around that materiality and visuality. And aesthetics, the importance of aesthetics in certain classes. But this is the kind of shift, and I think it's an interesting shift from photo elicitation in this more classical way, where we give participants camera and we tell them, go there, photograph that thing, and then tell me why. And, if you want to understand their experience of an event, of an environment, then you can just ask them to photograph what is important for them in that environment or at that event. And then see what people find important through those images. For example, photo elicitation. You can ask people to provide you with visual metaphors. So basically you just say, can you create a photograph or maybe choose a photograph that will represent your interpretation, maybe symbolism about this idea. And then you compare what kind of ideas, what kind of symbols people have. But photo elicitation, I think it's pretty much used in these sorts of ways where participants are photographing what is salient in environments or you want their interpretation of certain events or concepts. Maybe, they're working with certain concepts around social justice. So, okay, go outside and then photograph an area and then talk to me about it or what you see there. But now with generative AI image, we have the opportunity to actually go beyond the classical photograph, play with prompts, reach the stage where actually maybe there is a great density or salience in that photograph to be unpacked. And of course, we need to talk all the time about all those biases and other problems. I mean, I mentioned that about copyrights and acknowledgement or whose authorship, etc. We're still grappling with that. Okay, so some major things about it. So it's about, just like photo elicitation, it's about why elicitation? It's because it's about eliciting or provoking response from your participants. It can be research-driven or researcher-driven, Researcher, that means that I provide photos for the participants to look at and interpret it for me, and then I use that as data. It can be participant-driven, which is very often called photo voice or photo novella. So you ask participants to provide their voice through the pictures that they provide or they take. And these days create, if you like, with generative AI, or both. You can actually come with your own chosen images, only one image. Imagine how interesting it is. You have an idea, you find an image that represents something about that idea, because one image can never represent one idea, never ever, just something about it that is salient to you or to your participants. And then imagine having a gallery about that one concept. Let's say that you ask participants and then create their gallery. I mean, I have called that gallery conceptual gallery, because you have the key concept, you ask people, they provide you with images, and then you work with these images. You can analyze tendencies, trends across the images, what is there, but also what people tell you about it. Just classical interview analysis, but you have the image element as well, and it enriches it. You can use theme analysis for that if you prefer. And then, what's usually the purpose? They act. This is what images do. They act as these modes, triggers for interpretation, and also they're representational. So they represent something that needs to be then analyzed and unpacked at the interview. And if you give your participants, like researcher-driven photo elicitation, you give them chosen image that is yours, then it's interesting to see how different people interpret the same thing. So you have one thing, so it's different things. So you have one image, different interpretation, different conceptualizations of it. So you understand, okay, what are the trends? Maybe, you can also develop themes around what's really salient when people interpret it, like mixing it with theme analysis, and qualitative research. Or you can go with the other way around. You start with the concept, and then your participants are giving you their own images of the concept. So you see the thing. So you provide your own idea of the image or concept through the image, they interpret it, or the other way around. You have the concept that you give them, and then they give you the images that they can, I don't know, generate with the generative AI image generator friend. And here, I think what is interesting, because I've been doing this kind of generative AI image elicitation for a little while, you can use the direct concept prompt, like what I did in the case of scientists. So that's a direct concept prompt. Or you can imagine the image and then provide the description. So these are kind of two basic, and then we have variations also around this kind of prompting. I'm quite interested in prompting here. So why apply it? And they focus on representation and interpretation. And I'm circling here around semiotics. So there are different modes of representing. We are recreating, or kind of reminding ourselves what was mentioned earlier about unconscious. They tap into the unconscious, how we experience, how we observe, how we have learned about the visible world. And they also tap into the emotional world, which is very important, and experiential world. I think there is a tendency sometimes to undermine the role of emotional responses and emotions. But visuality is very strong when it comes to emotional response to visuality. And when we create images, this is what we have. We have intention, we have choices, and we have certain framing, either conceptual or with our ideas. So this is what we can talk about then in our data analysis. What kind of intentions people had when we asked them, okay, why did you do this? Why this image? What choices, you made? But also we can ask them about, okay, what is really important in this image? And then what people tell you that is important, then we can see how that actually combines with the importance of other participants. So focus on these things like kind of importance, salience. It's very interesting, at least to me. And then if they create and interpret photographs, and I'm here rehearsing what I was saying because I'm aware that it might be a new approach or a thing for some people, they really help you reach, again, their prior knowledge and experiences, because you're not asking them direct verbal questions. I don't know if you had that conversations, but a good question in, let's say, qualitative interviewing is not a direct question about what you want to research. Like you want to research, I don't know, certain gender issues in certain environments, and then you ask directly your participants about, and is it good that women are... No, it has to be subtle. It has to be really, really descriptive, so that they tell you descriptions of experiences, of events, of images. Because that's where, when you work with images, you can then ask them, you can give them a certain image, and then you can think first, okay, what can I ask them, so that I can actually help them tell me something that surfaces from their subconscious, unconscious, not unconscious, subconscious. I think it's interesting. So you ask them like, okay, so what do you see here? So why is this happening? Or can we think about it differently? Can it be, is it something missing from the picture? So if they cannot find what's missing, and you know very well what's missing, so that's your finding. That's your finding, and that's a very strong finding. Because sometimes people think, oh, they didn't tell me what I wanted. No, that's a great finding, That's a fabulous finding. Like, it just actually reinforces certain things that you were maybe wanting to argue about. So these are some of the questions, if you're really interested in the method per se, but I will move to it. Why did you take this photo? Why did you create it if it's generative AI? What is in this image? What is it? Just you tell me. What do you see? Hear what people see. Generally, from my experience, people do not go for details in the image, which I think is quite interesting. But with the details, you can do a lot of things. What can you tell me then about this object? So you point at a certain object in the image. Or who is that, or what is that? How does that relate to something that is important for the research? Your work, your role, your practice, your perception of whatever you're researching, because you would have a research interest. How does it relate to feelings, to your feelings, to other people's feelings, to culture, to power and control? I mean, power and control, if you have worked with Foucault, then you would be familiar with how much actually power and control can be also connected to analyzing imagery. Okay, and I can share this, you know, and Kyungmin can also share the presentation with you, okay? So here is the method, and I will finish this in 10 minutes so that you can have 15 minutes of final private work, okay? Let me put it that way. So usually with generative image photo elicitation interviews, this is what happens. And the method that I use is just the method that I call inquiry graphics, but with generative AI images. So participants are asked, again, to co-create an image, asking or using a generative AI platform to represent one salient aspect of the key research question concept, so you can decide what that is. It can be an issue, it can be a theory or a theoretical problem, or any focus that you want to have. It can be an experience. And then the image is used to elicit their answers and discussions with you at the interview. So that will be a classical photo elicitation interview. And then, of course, with generative AI, you just add the generative AI element, more or less. Okay, what approaches? Visual ethnography, anthropology, sociology, culture. It's usually rooted in observations and rich descriptions. So you can ask also people to do something and you observe them, you know, with images. I have done that as well. And I have done a method that's called Think Aloud interview with images. I will tell you in a moment. You can use ANT or actor network theory if you want theorization, or even chat, but I think ANT is probably more likely to be appropriate, or any sort of socio-material theorization, new material theories, post-digital education, and that constitutes more or less some sort of new approaches to interviewing, although there is so much more. You can interview with objects, with materials. You can go for a walk and then see how people react to an environment. Like, you can really create such creative, qualitative interviewing in many different ways. How to analyze now, of course, is the question. I think you can usually, if it's easy, you can either use the classical theme analysis in combination with elements of, you know, what people see in images, so that images are also important there. You can also use critical discourse analysis in terms of, you know, what people are saying, or really focusing on the criticality within their discourses around usually a sociocultural and material and digital topic. These are more non-verbal, image-driven approaches, such as critical multimodal analysis, and this analysis that I developed and published this book in 2020, which can be described in all these ways, as socio-material, as visual, multimodal, new material analysis. But the bottom line is that the challenge is the dualisms in higher education, especially between what we call abstractions and abstract concepts and concreteness, concrete experiences. You know, we have abstract concepts. Let's say, okay, very topical, climate change. It's an abstract concept, okay? But we cannot understand climate change without concrete experiences. I mean, a very cliche concept maybe, but what I mean by abstract concept is that we name things. You know, economy. Economy is an abstract concept, but then how it materializes is really important. And that's where sociomaterial is, for example, important. And this is the inquiry graphic sign that I use building on semiotics. So there is a pictorial form, which is an image. Then there is a verbalized concept form. So you have the concept. Then these, they refer to something. They have some objects. And their objects are, for pictures, something in the real or imaginary world. But it's quite important to understand that, you know, there are these relationships. And today I don't have time to really get deeper into that, but, you know, I could at some other point. And conceptual object is basically the entire repertoire of certain concepts. So if I say climate change, that's climate change. It's just a verbalized form. I can write it, I can say it. So that's the form. But it refers to everything that people have ever said and written about climate change. And now this is what we focus on. So what do people interpret then about it? What they tell us, what they really choose from that repertoire that they would actually then make work for them and how they understand it. So that's usually what we want to discover in qualitative research. And I call this pairing of the picture and how people describe the picture and how they talk about the concept as multimodal anchorage. So how they anchor the picture narrative, you know, the content of the picture and the concept narrative. So, you know, climate change. An iceberg, okay, floating. Ice is melting, okay? So the way I'm just describing to you what's multimodal anchorage. So I now start talking about the picture and I say, well, you know, ice is melting and I understand that because that's the consequence of climate change in these ways. So I've done the anchorage. I anchored the picture as some sort of physical expression to the concept. And now this is a potent opportunity to start poking. But why? But does everyone agree? But who does not agree? But why? You know, and then you can poke and poke and poke about these things. You can look at the picture and say, well, this is what we are seeing, but what if certain images are maybe, you know, AI generated? What do we do with that? How do we, you know, discover that? I mean, of course, it's hard. People, scientists at the moment are working on better understanding which images are actually generative AI creations, which I think is interesting. I think still there's something a little bit uncanny about it. Okay, this is how it works, the IG sign, if we have the photo. Let's say that picture that I showed you is a photo. So we have photo, we paired it with scientist as a form, and we have these objects. So all information, everything that we have about scientists, and then of course, what people, when they interpret, what they really focus on. And also the representation, we talked about the gender bias. So, you know, it's this interaction in semiotic terms that can be the basis of analysis. And this is what happens with generative AI. We have the third party here, you know, and it's invisible, and that's its power, basically. Because we look at something, but when we process it, we're not at the same time really deeply thinking, but actually that's data object. Data is like algorithms, data, what was fed to the machine is behind this image. So that's the new element in the object. And that's a game changer, basically. And just one final thing, maybe two. These are the steps when I analyze the interviews or when I ask people. So I ask them, what are you noticing? What is salient? What people most notice or discuss? What do they really note when I ask them to look at this representational existence? And then I'm playing with Roland Barthes' ideas, although I might not be entirely on Barthes' side when it comes to certain things, but I think it's useful to think about the notation as quality and appearance description. So kind of that level when we're describing things. So how people describe the picture. So for the iceberg, the climate changes is floating. People say, well, this is an iceberg and it's floating in the sea. So that would be more denotative. But when you start talking about what it means at the deeper level, so it makes me feel anxious because, I'm more aware that maybe it's coming closer to us, especially if it's from the area that is close to them. I mean, I had people took photos from the area like that 5 years ago, the water level was really much, much lower. So that's the more connotation, contextual meaning. And then finally, you have these critical inferences that link to the concept. So you need to dig deeper about the climate change. So you ask them questions that can uncover a little bit more how they're thinking about the climate change, but kind of using the image. Okay. And, do you think that these people would choose very similar image? Okay, I'm not sure, but maybe. Why not? Why yes? So what else is happening there? Is the color blue or the color, whatever color you're seeing, is it significant? Colors are, of course, significant, but we also need to know if we're researching the climate change. And trust me, I cannot research it alone. That's why we need interdisciplinary qualitative research, because otherwise it's so hard. And these are another ways at looking at it. So you have image rationale. So why was the image generated? What was the inspiration? What thinking and reflection behind? Then you have more of a socio-material interpretation. So people are noticing, naming things. They're describing, inferring, affective cultural, so linked to the emotions, and speculative critical. So you can ask questions, speculations, they're great. You can ask questions such as, what if? What if this was in a different place? What if the represented was something else? What if we think about it in 50 years? What if you now transport yourself 50 years ago? And things like that. So speculative questions with images are really good. And now I think Kyungmi asked me to stop at 10 to 5. So is that correct?
Yeah, but can I just
Yeah.
ask questions? I think it's helpful probably for us to situate this a little bit in practice. So I'll probably ask questions, a couple of questions on behalf of the participants, and you kind of walk through that a bit to make it things clear. So do you want to go back to a couple of pages where you have? Let's the first one more back. Let's start somewhere here. So based on my understanding, what you're explaining is there are two ways for us to be possibly used generative AI created images. The first one is, as a researcher, I develop one and bring into the interview. And the question can be whether my image should be intentionally provocative, or it's okay just for us to ask ChatGPT to generate one, just for us, anything. So that can be the first question. So it's if we create and bring the image into interview, let's start from here. So the scientist, that image, do you want us to be intentionally provocative there and like make it as a lady black in like, I
You
don't know,
could.
pajama?
You
Or
could.
do you want it's like to be just traditional, whatever? So we
Yeah.
start from there.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. And I was just about to stop to actually open the space for actual people linking these things to your own research. I think it's entirely up to you. I mean, you can do the purpose or give purpose to the image in any way you want. So if you start, I think it's a great thing to have a provocative image, to start with something that will really provoke people's thinking. I think that's brilliant. But you can go for anything else. You can just say, well, you can choose something that you think is a cliche image. Because this is a great question, because in that book I developed something which is, different types of representing and pairing like concept and images. So, for example, the provocative is something that is mentioned there in terms of like kind of challenging the stereotype, like, probing, provoking. You can go for something really different. You can provide a historical image from 100 years ago to focus more on the historicity. Maybe that's what you want to research. So the quick answer is like, yes, you can really play with the purpose.
Oh, can I use this mic?
Yeah.
It's gone in there.
Can you hear?
So let's just imagine I bring the provocative, the
Yeah.
scientist image into my interview, and I show that. And what can be the pictorial object there? Do you want me to ask my participant to just tell me what's in there? They can see it.
Mm-hmm.
So that will be first step. Yeah. And they will say, probably not scientist, because it doesn't look like scientist to that, probably they're having a conventional image. And that's something that, and then after that, how are we going to move from pictorial to conceptual? So how does that change?
Okay, so the pictorial is really concerned with the picture itself. But you can, first of all, see how people interpret the picture, and then you can use pictorial elements to think with those elements about the concept. So, for example, more metaphorical images are really great for that. So, okay, let me give you an example, a really concrete example from my own research. We explored educational theory, which is constructivism, okay? It's basically about learners developing knowledge by experimenting, learning on their own, constructing knowledge, interacting, teacher is the guide from the side, etc. And in one picture, the student provided the cliche image of two children doing an independent experiment in the so-called lab. And then what happened during the conversation, we looked at the elements of the image. The children were dressed in a particular way. They were wearing goggles, the goggles like to protect. And then we suddenly started thinking about, okay, these elements are also important in the image to help us reflect and think about the concept, because the concept is constructivism. So we would then ask questions. So this is really creative and critical analysis. So the questions that you ask is like, well, is there a connection between constructivism and protection and kind of goggles? And then suddenly people are like, protection, but parents would protect, but would children alone, left in the lab, put on the goggles, if not instructed ever before or something like that? So basically that led to the insight about things such as the role of adults in children's learning when it comes to constructivism, that is usually not considered in terms of these sort of observational and protective roles. And that, things can happen, but then there is another reflection that people had, which is transparency. Because goggles, you have glass. What I'm now doing is called associative thinking. So use associations with the elements to then, dig deeper with it. And then, of course, people have all sorts of ideas.
So let's say that I will have 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
max because they're busy, and then how far we can go with starting with the. So do I have to push really for them to make connection between science element they picked and then meetings? Do we have to unpack everything during the interview, or we can just? So how are we gonna manage? How do we know that we should stop here?
I think from my experience, people are not likely to be talking about the image itself. That they really jump for the meaning. So you then pick and choose yourself. Okay, I think this is interesting, but then you report on that because then you ask everyone so that you can have some sort of consistency across interviews. So let's say goggles. So they're interesting. So how people interpret goggles in relation to the concept, but the time is limited. So you would then really choose to, the questions, just like in classical interviews, you would have very similar structure. You will ask simple questions such as, so what is the meaning of this image? Because you already asked them to create it in relation to the concept. And the concept is what you want to research, whether that's constructivism or social justice or gender issues in certain spaces or whatnot. I mean, you also have diverse interests. So you would, as the researcher, you would then have that kind of power, and we have to acknowledge that, to help and lead, but it has to be a conversation. But you can write down for yourself, these are the important parts. There's something about noticing, about describing, and then linking. Because when you ask questions such as, okay, so how is this linked to the concept? This is the central question. And of course, you will most certainly get a lot from 1 hour.
So based on what I heard from you, it looks like it's very important for us to have very clear purpose of why we are using it. Because some of us are doing critical multimodal discourse analysis, and then it's really unpacking for an entire hour to be useful.
Yes.
But some of us want to just learn about their experiences, and then this is just opening kind of 20 minutes max that we want to spend that with them to be ready to talk about their personal experience rather than really immerse entire time in there.
Absolutely.
All right, so I think that's really important for us to have the plan and how far we can go with that. So I just want to go back. To go back to that. Let's start again. This can stay here. But second scenario then, let's say we are hopefully it's not gonna let's hope that all technological infrastructure is on our side. So we have tablet and then we have internet and then we're being able to interview our participants.
Yeah.
This scenario that we will ask them to create the interview images with us in front of us. Here, I would ask, because I think all of us had experience. Actually, ChatGPT doesn't give us the image that we like at the beginning.
Yeah.
So the prompt, it's like going back to the media literacy or AI literacy.
Absolutely.
It really depends on how participants be able to create the images that they think that representative of their thinking. However, we can't give them time for more than 20 minutes. So let's say we have given them 5 minutes max, and they try probably 2 or 3 times. And then third image, and then they say probably second one is that, that's fine. So any image that they created that they wouldn't really like anyway, let's start from there. How are you going to go through with that scenario? How as interview all?
Yes.
So, and then that,
Okay, so
more likes.
Yeah. There are 2 ways, because I have not mentioned that. It's a good question, but what I mostly do, and I think in my opinion that's best, so to bypass this sort of time, taking processes, but you might be actually, if you're interested in thinking processes, then I would recommend this, which is called Think Aloud Interview with Images. So you ask participants to think with you if you're interested how they think about a thing. And then, okay, you just stop, but you try to see their processes, how they go about, but you do give them a pre-warning and say, after, 15, 20 minutes, we'll move to this stage, we move to that stage, so we have only 1 hour. However, always what I've done is there is a task. So there is a task for the participants to actually send you the image or prepare the image for the interview. So then at the interview, they come with the image, and then you ask them all the questions, kind of, how did you find it? And then they tell you, and then I think the prompting is really important, because this is one of the major findings when I was doing my research in the first phase. I realized that in order to be efficient during the interview, especially if you have 1 hour, you need to have these preparatory mechanisms. So you ask the participants to prepare the image with a certain task. So generate or create the image to represent X or Y. In your opinion, of course, just one aspect that is important or certain to you. They prepare it for the interview and then together talk about it, because otherwise, just as you're saying, so that's a really important point. And yeah, I was just coming to it, but it's important, so you're kind of asking the best questions.
So once we have image that will go through the similar process of unpacking it with
Yeah.
them for our purpose with the time limit.
That's
That's good. Probably the last question that I think probably going back to all at the beginning of your presentation. So what's so special about, I mean, I heard a lot of things from you today, but what's so special about created using AI? Because all the things that we discussed, I couldn't really see much difference between AI generated image and then just image that I read or image that photo voice that people have done. So is it during the interview, is that something that we should keep in mind about this nature photo which has been generated kind of by ChatGPT as basically fake? Do you have any?
That's a good question. So basically, we can still, like, to a very good extent, I mean, because we've done these kinds of things, it's people can still recognize whether it's generative AI image or a photograph that is taken. Of course, photograph can also be tampered with. You just use Adobe Photoshop and then you do stuff. So basically, I think what is new and unique with generative AI, and I don't have the images right now, but I can add to, just an example, I can add the pictures to show, for example, what the generative AI image content can have in terms of density of content and information, so that people really want to represent something that's important to them that you can never do through a photograph, like never.
Right. I mean, to me, it makes total sense, because basically if you ask me to take photo of the lab, it will be pretty difficult to access. But to begin with, that image will show us even more detail that we can imagine ourselves.
Exactly.
That's the point to do this.
That's
and
right.
That's the benefit of really engaging with this.
That's right.
All right, I think that at least that makes sense to me. I really know that there are a lot of questions that the audience want to raise.
Yes.
But we have to close it. I feel so bad, but I think it's a lot. We had a lot to take, and then I think Nataša did a brilliant job to make it possible for us to open up with these ideas. And of course, that 1 hour and 50 minutes is not long enough for her to go through every single really details. But I think we're okay, right? We're good. We're independent, self-regulated learners that we can move forward from here. So having said that, I really want to show us appreciation to Nataša, traveling all the way, and she still has energy. I can't believe that she didn't slip any minute. But so shall we give her a big round of applause?
Thank you, me. And I just want to say, because now, the idea is, because I have your research questions, so there are two options, because exactly as Kyung-mi says, this is a big area, it's a complex area. So I would invite you, especially now while I'm here, to write to me. Feel free, in very simple terms, kind of, this is my idea, this is what I would do, this is how I understand it. And I'm happy to send back some, feedback, some, we can have that sort of interaction. just to, I would be very happy. I'd love to
Just
wrap
make
up.
sure that you're not creating too much work for yourself.
I know, Kimmy. I usually do that, but in any case,
I will
I will,
circulate your
circulate,
email
yes.
with your permission with everyone here. If you have
Exactly.
further questions, just send a direct
Please.
email to her. But she's gonna be around. So we're gonna have 10-minute break, and then if you have any question, can you come
Thank
to her
you.
and ask her right now?
Thank
and
you.
otherwise we'll take care of it.
Yes,
Is that
please.
okay?
Yeah, let's just.
All right.
Yes,
Thank you.
have a little break. Yeah, and I have your research questions, so I can definitely look it up and then share. But I will send my ideas to you, and then you can share with the group. Yeah. Fab.